Welcome on board the Rich Planet Starship, broadcasting from somewhere high above the Earth. I'm Richard D. Hall. This week's guest is an author and the inventor of what is claimed to be the most difficult puzzle in the world. He has researched ancient philosophy, religions, and mythology, and from this work derived what he believes to be the true story of mankind. So without further ado, let's activate the teleporter and get him beamed up onto the ship. Tom Arnott.
Hi, how are
Welcome
you?
to the show.
I'm just checking that I'm all there.
Welcome on board the Starship, Tom. Now then, we've got a lot to get through, a lot to talk about. You've spent a lot of years studying ancient religions, ancient mythology, philosophy, but you came to invent this particular puzzle. Can you tell us what led you to actually coming up with this puzzle there, Tom, before we'll go into the actual how it works?
Well, essentially, I think a lifetime of an inquiring mind and things I used to read and study and research kind of differentiated me from my friends, my peer group, if you like. I wasn't so much interested in football or drinking or things like that. I was more fascinated by physics, universal physics and things like that. And I don't know if it was that particular mindset that led to it, but the puzzle kind of came to me in a dream, for want of a better way of putting it. The concept, although abstract, was strong enough and the dream was lucid enough that when I got up the next morning I made some notes and diagrams, and it's kind of evolved from that point.
So how long ago was this?
Oh, this was approximately 9 years ago now.
Right. Now, I've got here, I think everyone will recognise this, the very popular Rubik's Cube. And there are some similarities between this and what you're going to show us, Tom, aren't there?
Yeah.
Now, I think everyone will have seen one of these, and the important point when comparing this to your puzzle is that this has, I think it's 54 faces.
Yeah.
And they're all external on the puzzle. Yours is similar, but it has more faces. Can you explain why, Tom?
Well, essentially, first of all, the similarities lie in the fact that they're both essentially a cube. And a cube is the simplest form of three-dimensional space, your height, breadth, and width kind of thing. Now, the difference being with the Rubik's Cube, all your center cubes on each of the faces are fixed. They'll always be there. All your corner cubes can only be corner cubes. With this cube, any cube can be anywhere in space, if you like, in any position in space. So there the similarities end.
So it's not held rigidly together the way that the Rubik's Cube is. It is a matrix of 3 by 3 by 3 cubes, 27 cubes in total, which fit together. So there's a cube right in the center.
Yeah,
you would say.
there is.
So would you care to just show us how it fits together, Tom?
Well, essentially how it works, and I'll turn this around so maybe the camera can get a little view of it. Every one of these 27 cubes has a number on each of its faces, numbered 1 to 6. Yet the order of those numbers are different from cube to cube. There's no two cube the same.
So just to stop you there, if you open out a cube into a flat shape, you get a shape of a cross.
Yeah.
And you can put the numbers from 1 to 6 in any of those 6 boxes.
Yes.
And there are actually, you wouldn't actually think it instinctively, but there are 30 different ways you can arrange those numbers in that cross.
Yeah.
So there are 30 completely different cubes that you can make out of 6 different symbols on the sides.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
only 30.
Right. There are only 30.
Yeah.
But there are 27 in that cube.
Yeah.
And that's a key thing to this puzzle, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah.
So carry on. I'll let you carry on. How does the thing have to fit together?
Well, first of all, because each cube is disjointed from the rest, apart from them being 30 possible cubes, of which we're only using 27, each cube can be any way up and any way around. So each cube can be in any one of 24 different positions. So if you multiply 24 by 30, you get 720. So there's 720 different states that this thing can be in. And the idea of it is for instance, if I take that cube away, you've got to build this mother cube, the 3 by 3 by 3. However, there's only one rule. Every face that touches another face must bear the same number or symbol or colour or whatever it is.
Right, so adjacent faces must have the same number on either side. Does it matter if they're the wrong way, upside down?
It doesn't matter if they're twisted, as long as a 1 is matched to a 1, a 2 to a 2, a 3 to a 3.
Right.
Now that sounds fairly simple.
Now, just stop you there. There are 162 faces in total on that, in your model.
Yeah.
There are 54 in the Rubik's Cube, because
Yeah.
you've got internal faces which have to match together.
Yes.
Right, so that's what makes the number of permutations more. So carry on then.
Yeah. It's the internal faces
That need
that
to
have to
match.
match. And you have to build up your mother cube, ensuring that that rule is adhered to. Now, when you get to a space where there's, for instance, if I take that one out gently as I can, for instance, for that cube to fit in there, it must have the same number on that face, and that face for it to match. It must be twinned.
Right.
Now, the idea, the way it was in a dream, what you were left with on the outside would be a set of numbers, symbols, which may or may not be some kind of algorithm or message or something like that.
Right.
But when you apply it and you do the mathematics on it, I found that this particular puzzle in levels of difficulty is about tens of millions more difficult than the Rubik's Cube.
Right. I mean, one thing that would differentiate the two is that when you're doing the Rubik's Cube, you can't lift a piece out and put it somewhere else. No. You can with your cube. Yeah. So that some of the difficulty in doing the Rubik's Cube is the logistical problem of getting that square to over there without disrupting all of the others. Yeah. So in that regard, your cube is easier in that one regard, but there are so many more combinations that make it. Yeah. I mean, how many? You've actually took this to a maths lecturer, I believe. Yeah. And he was calculated how many different permutations of that cube there are. Yeah.
Well, at first, and I'm going back some years now, I went to the maths lecturer at Derwenside College, and I met him in Stanley, and I gave him the cube and asked him to verify my findings of permutations, because it was such a fantastic number. You know, it was mind-boggling.
Can you explain why, Tom? Because there are, when you put the first cube down, there are actually 24 different ways it can go?
Well, for instance, if I was to start building this puzzle from scratch, I would have to choose which corner I was going to start in, and then I'd have to select a cube to go in that corner. Now, my odds of selecting the right cube are 27 to 1. Once selected, which way up does it go? The odds of making the right decision there are 6 to 1. And if you get that right, then which way around does it go? And the odds of getting that 4 to 1. So it's about 630 to 1 that you get the first cube correct.
Right.
And then there's the second, and so on, the 27.
So it multiplies every time for every single cube that has to be in. So have you got a figure for that number? I mean, there's a great deal of zeros in it, isn't there?
Well, there's about 35 zeros after it.
So now the Rubik's Cube is the number of permutations is 4.33 times 10 to the power of 19. Yeah. So it's 19 zeros. Yeah. So, I mean, this...
It's 35 zeros.
So apparently there's more permutations than there are atoms in the universe in your puzzle.
That's one quote I was quoted.
Right.
Some years later, we took it to the mathematics department of Newcastle University, and we got chatting to a guy in there, and same thing. It is just phenomenally, you know, the permutations is just a fantastic number, you know.
Now, because there are actually 30 different orientations of cube with these 6 numbers, you can actually build a solution by using those spare cubes. Yeah. So what you do is you build it up, and then you're left with 2 or 3, and you choose the right one that fits.
Well, that helps me, yeah.
But once you've constructed that solved cube, if you then give that to somebody else and muddle it up, you reckon there's no way anyone can fit that cube back together?
Well, quite briefly, out of the 30 possible cubes, I choose 27 for the puzzle. There's no way of knowing which 27 I chose. It's like picking 27 numbers from 30, it's more difficult than the lottery. There's
And
no
you've charted a lot of this out on a spreadsheet, and you've obviously put a lot of work into that spreadsheet, working out all of the permutations, combinations, and it works out the total number, which I think the maths guy said that you'd have to divide it by 24, because once you solve your cube, there are actually 24 different solutions, because you might have that way, that way, that way.
Yeah, it's the same cube, but just in different orientations in space. And each individual cube has to be in its correct position, the correct way up and the correct way around, and it just simply will not go anywhere else. Now, the enigmatic part of it is anyone, a child, can build the first layer of 9 cubes. 99% of people can build a second layer, and quite a lot of people can get up to 24, 25, 26 cubes. But nobody has ever completed all 27 cubes.
Right.
And the problem is, you can look back and you've got no way of knowing where you went wrong. It could have been the very first cube you put down, but you've got no way of knowing that.
Yeah, yeah. And you've tried to come up with ways of making the cube a bit more ergonomic, shall we say, so that when you fit two faces that are correct, that they pull together, like with a magnet or something like that.
Yeah.
And that in itself is an engineering problem.
Well, originally when I thought about marketing this, or putting it out to the world to test themselves, or to test themselves against the friends or what have you, it was said by one of the guys I contacted, well, it's disjointed. If you lose a piece, the puzzle's spoiled. And I said, well, you know, one of the greatest selling puzzles of all time is a jigsaw puzzle. If you lose a piece, you know, it's the same can be said of that.
Yeah, how did they market that, if you lose a piece?
But I took on board what he said, and I tried to come up with ways of, once they were clicked together, that actually stuck. And it can get pretty complicated.
Yeah, because we spent the afternoon talking about this the other day, didn't we?
Yeah.
And you tried it with magnets, and obviously with magnets you've only got 2 different orientations.
Well, exactly. I mean,
so you've got some magnets there.
With magnets, if it's the correct way around, it'll fit in. If it's the wrong way around, it'll reject it naturally. And I was trying to come up with a way of making that cube the same way that it accepts or rejects. Be it right or wrong.
So you would maybe need more than one magnet, a sequence of 3 magnets which lock together or something like that.
It can get pretty complicated. So if ever this goes to market or anything like that, it may be more evolved than it is now. But at this point in time, the theory is there to show people, and you can play with it, you know. You can.
My idea was to have a little microprocessor inside each cube, which could differentiate between each of its faces, and then when you connect it to the adjacent cube, it makes an electrical contact which sends a signal to say either turn the magnet on or off. So, and the beauty of doing it that way would mean that each cube would be identical. You just have to program the cube to give it its orientation of faces. So, but I guess there's expense involved in it.
I mean, in the future, what you've got to do, you can't price yourself out in the market. I mean, you've got to ask yourself, what will consumers pay for this kind of puzzle to amuse themselves? I mean, let me just say here, you could also, it could be a team effort. It could be like 3-dimensional dominoes. You know, you and I get so many cubes each, we each put one down, and one of us can't do it, can't make a move. I mean, so it's more than just a solitary puzzle. It could be played as a team. But if it was to get to that stage, what would a consumer pay for that kind of puzzle? And you've got to get your pricing right. So if it was using computer electronics inside, it might put it outside the reach of a normal consumer.
And you did have a computer program developed where the person can try and solve the puzzle in 3D in a computer program, and I've had a look at that. We'll try and get that on the screen. It's quite impressive. But my thoughts on how to tackle solving it was that you would need the 30 cubes to build a solved cube, because you can only solve it really by cheating, by having these spare cubes to fit in as and even then it's probably quite tricky. But if you get a solved cube with using the spare ones, what I would then do is try and group see if you can fit the cubes into groups. In other words, are there any similarities between those cubes and those cubes? And then once you've grouped them, see if there's a pattern inside. That would be the way that I would tackle it. But I can see that it's, you know, got far more permutations than a Rubik's Cube.
Well, I agree with your train of thought that out of chaos comes order, you know, and scientists and mathematicians are saying that now. So there may be some kind of pattern like that. I mean, one thought we had was it is difficult enough. We could make a unique selling point if we were to market this puzzle and say, for instance, I would give £1 million to the first person to complete it. Now, that would prompt people to buy it and maybe pay a premium price for it. But before I did any of that, then of course, any ideas such as your own would have to be exhausted first. Could this be cheated? Is there an algorithm, like there is with the Rubik's Cube, God's algorithm, that makes it simple to do once you know the knack? So far, in the 9 years, I've never found one.
Because when you lay the first cube down, I mean, that might be wrong. But when you decide which one's going to go next to it, that could be wrong. So you would, I would say that you'd need to somehow group them to say that that group always sits next to that group, so you're limiting the number of combinations somehow.
Assuming there is a group
pattern. Assuming that there's a group pattern. Right. All right, and Tom, well, we're going to go for a short commercial break now, but we'll talk more about the cube after the break, and we're going to talk about ancient wisdom and religion as well. So don't go away.